The players were under pressure since Caitlin Clark was unable to play in the WNBA All-Star Game. This was their opportunity to demonstrate that they were deserving of the attention and the large sum of money they were requesting. On the court, they made their remark, but the supporters also made a significant statement. Additionally, ESPN doesn't want you to be aware of it. Once again, ESPN is providing coverage for the league and its players after the viewership figures were released.
It's fine to just say, just post the ratings. But, it is another situation than pretending like Caitlin Clark doesn't exist.
Since this isn't the first time they've attempted to downplay Caitlin Clark's significance, her followers instantly called them out. This time, however, it's backfiring greatly in light of what transpired on the court. Let's dissect everything. But first, like this video if you're tired of ESPN's tricks. And subscribe for more Caitlin Clark and WNBA updates. When it comes to Caitlin Clark's influence on viewership, ESPN has a habit. They don't tell the whole truth, but they also don't lie. Rather, they select and choose. They only utilize numbers that support their desired narrative, even albeit they are factually accurate. The figures they omit about Caitlin are even more revealing. Consider this as an illustration. ESPN boasted that viewership had increased by 119% following the 2025 WNBA draft. That appears to be a huge victory for the league at first view. However, if you take a closer look, you'll see something strange. They are drawing comparisons with 2023. So, why not in 2024? Anyone who works in media or marketing will tell you. Instead of comparing this year to 2 years ago, you compare this year to last year. Why, then, would ESPN forgo the 2024 draft? Because the draft that attracted 2.45 million views was Caitlin Clark's. The actual headline would have been this if they had contrasted against that. Viewership of the draft has decreased by 49%. However, they wish to keep that story private. In actuality, this isn't an isolated incident. They achieved the same feat in the second round, the Sweet 16, and the Elite 8 of March Madness in 2025. ESPN made a comparison using 2023 viewership figures. On the surface, it sounds reasonable because Caitlin participated in the competition that year. However, the comparison abruptly ended when they reached the national title game's Final Four. 2023 is over. Rather, they simply stated that it was the third highest ever, which is remarkable until you consider that the 2 years prior were 23 and 24. Caitlin advanced to the Final Four in both years. What would happen if they did display all of the numbers? They would have to acknowledge that the number of viewers fell by more than 10 million. In other words, if they surpass Caitlin Clark's numbers, they will compare. Silence, though, if they don't. It's not a mistake. That's intentional. The funniest aspect is that they don't expect fans to notice it. They believe that if they present enough impressive statistics, people will assume that women's basketball simply keeps breaking records in the absence of Caitlin Clark. In actuality, they're making it much more apparent. The Strand effect is the cause. It is the result of trying to conceal something. You also make it much more noticeable by doing this. ESPN is currently doing just that. And because every twist, every selective stat, and every dodge only serves to confirm one thing, Caitlin supporters recognize it right away and call it out every time. They obviously don't want us to know that Caitlin Clark is spearheading the expansion. However, it's not limited to ESPN. Every time the league, the players, or the media attempt to minimize Caitlin's significance, they fail to do so, which is an issue for the entire W ecosystem. They simply reveal themselves. To be honest, it's turned into a joke at this point. The outcry was swift after Caitlin Clark was named Time Athlete of the Year. It's not that she didn't deserve it. Rather, it seems that everyone in the league did. As if the award were for participation, there were appeals to have every WNBA player on the cover. It's funny how that standard only applies to Caitlin because no one requests a group shot when Asia Wilson, Breanna Stewart, or Nafa Collier are highlighted by Time or Sports Illustrated.
And it didn't end there.
When Caitlin won an SB, her coach was unable to publicly celebrate her without giving credit to every other player in the league.
Noticed or heard about it during the game. Caitlin got honored as the WNBA Player of the Year. The ESPYs just what does it mean to have her impact so far? I mean, there are a lot of really good players in this league, and she got honored as the best player in the league by the others.
Yeah, I mean, obviously she continues to get new awards. She continues to break barriers. She continues to do things that we haven't seen before. I mean, obviously you think about the Stewie's MVPs of the league and, championship winners, and Asia's MVPs of the league and championship winners. And of course, Sue Bird, who was sitting, in the building today. And, Caitlin is so fortunate, as well as all these guys, really. I mean, that they don't know anything any different than the WNBA.
The biosphere surrounding her is so delicate. Even praise must be managed politically. Furthermore, Caitlin's popularity is seldom acknowledged by the media on her own merits.
The new fans are sucking life out of the WNBA right now.
Start with you, Kels, because Lord Jesus, your team and their fans,
Jesus,
they be getting up in everybody's business. I think so many fans, have the freedom to say whatever they want to us, and unfortunately, there's a lot of nasty things that come with it. They don't have people coming to their job saying these nasty things. So, we definitely have to protect the players better.
They claim that someone else is to blame. A story, a moment, a rivalry. Anything other than the player who really pulls the numbers. And when they acknowledge that she has millions of supporters, all of a sudden those fans become an issue.
I just said we would not be talking about Caitlin Clark the way that we do if it wasn't for that moment with Angel Reese. And I will die on this hill. I will die on this hill.
I was with you.
Well, I will die on this hill. I will die on this hill.
And it gets worse after that. In addition to being boisterous, Caitlin supporters are now poisonous, bigoted, or cruel. They don't seem to support Paige Bueckers since she is a social justice activist. Alternatively, in order to control her fan base, Caitlin ought to have selected Angel Reese in the All-Star draft. The Phoenix Mercury also joined in, sending a quite overt message suggesting that Indianapolis isn't a safe place for athletes. It's crazy because this ecosystem, the league, the players, and the media are attempting to penalize the supporters who made it possible and minimize the players who are actually driving the league's expansion. And they're aware of it. However, they would prefer to defend their egos in order to maintain their power, which is ridiculous because that power vanishes the moment Caitlin's admirers stop paying attention. And that power is crucial for the players right now. A heated CBA discussion is now underway between the players. And they're trying to profit from a huge media rights agreement that, let's face it, is primarily being pushed by Caitlin Clark. However, there are actual worries behind the scenes since the owners are aware of the facts, regardless of what the players and media say. Caitlin's appeal is crucial to this league. Ratings and ticket prices plummet by 50% or more when she's not around. And that isn't typical. Not in any other league.
3-point contest. ESPN, ABC, and Disney score the historic viewership for the 2025 WNBA All-Star events. Friday, July 18th, ESPN airs the most watched WNBA skills and 3-point contest ever, averaging 1.3 million viewers, which is up 89% versus last year's WNBA skills and 3-point contest, up 89%.
The players were therefore put in a terrible situation when Caitlin Clark was excluded from the All-Star game. This was meant to be the league's greatest event, but all of a sudden they were on their own. There would be no Caitlin, no assurance of a ratings boost, just the players and an opportunity to show that they could handle the situation without her. And things went sideways from the jump. As soon as Caitlin was ruled out, ticket prices fell by 48%. One major question resulted from that. How much worse could it get? Without her, could the players pull off a miracle? Or would the figures reveal the true extent of this dependence? The ratings have been released. ESPN also did all out to minimize the damage.
I can't imagine, folks, you know how many NBA players can get injured? And the prices would never drop to this low. LeBron James can be injured, Steph Curry could be injured, Kevin Durant could be in, and the prices still will not drop to be this low. $75? Folks, I'm sure there's some high school football teams down in Texas that charge you at least $75 to get to a home game.
In fact, the weekend got off to a great start. A significant increase in viewership over 2024 was seen in the skills competition and three-point contest, which is encouraging for the league. The players appeared to have a chance. Without Caitlin Clark on the court, they could be able to set records. However, ESPN immediately returned to its former methods.
This is historic. Like they were like, scored historic viewership. How is it historic when it's like half of last year? Last year was nearly 4 million. How is it historic when it's like half of last year?
Have you seen it? The All-Star Game ratings were compared to 2023, the year prior to Caitlin Clark's league debut. Even though they had made a comparison between the skills competition and 2024 in the same post just a few lines earlier. So why the abrupt shift? I wonder, perhaps it's because 3.4 million people watched last year's All-Star Game, which did include Caitlin Clark. 2.2 million this year. That is a 36% decrease. 2 million fewer people watched.
Gone.
And they buried that rather than taking ownership of it. Is it possible to state that Kareem Abdul-Jabbar is the NBA's all-time top scorer while adding a small asterisk that reads, except for LeBron? This is what it is. A conscious decision to twist the figures in an impressive manner without revealing the actual events. Due to the fact that most individuals are busy, they have 2.2 million viewers, a 158% increase. And consider the league's skyrocketing popularity. ESPN is aware that they don't have time to investigate further. Therefore, while the numbers are technically correct, the manner they are presented is intended to mislead and present an untrue narrative, giving the impression that this year's All-Star Game was, get this, historic.
All-Star Game ratings from this past weekend was the second most watched WNBA All-Star Game ever behind 2024. No surprise there. 2025 WNBA All-Star Game was the most watched program of the night across all of TV. The night, not the day. With 2.2 million average viewers, up 158% from the 2023 WNBA All-Star Game.
This is where ESPN truly made a mistake because, rather than resolving the issue, their spin made it worse. The Strand effect was set off by it. The 2023 comparison trick caught everyone's attention.
The WNBA players in their pregame warm-up came out in these t-shirts, pay us what you owe us. And then immediately pivoted to playing the worst All-Star game in the history of professional All-Star games. They took the court in t-shirts. Pay us what you owe us. We're underpaid. This league has lost millions of dollars, but we're underpaid. Pay us what you owe us. And then they served up a doo-doo sandwich to sports fans.
This is the problem. 2. By WNBA All-Star Game standards, 2 million viewers is actually fantastic. However, the decline, down 36% from Caitlin Clark's record from the previous year, makes her influence impossible to overlook. Additionally, it reverses what the players did. All-Star Weekend was a little awkward. Their chests swelled. The protest shirts were on them. Give us what you owe us. They promoted their message about what they deserve during a fan event. The truth is as follows. In the court of public opinion, it was a risk. It also backfired.
Well, Uncle KC, ESPN was comparing this year's All-Star Game to 2023. Why? Why in the hell would they do that? I'll tell you why ESPN did this. This is another example of the mainstream media protecting the WNBA. This is another example of ESPN polishing the turd with this dump of a league.
Kelsey Plum was the icing on the cake. She implied that Caitlin Clark and her squad didn't care enough to meet about the protest t-shirts when she criticized them during the post-game news conference.
The t-shirt, just United front was determined this morning that we had a meeting for. And, not to tattletale, but 0 members of Team Clark were very present for that. But no, we were just, we had a very, that really needed to be mentioned.
Instead of applauding Indiana for holding a record-breaking weekend and honoring the sold-out audience, the city, or the fans, she remarked that it was an absurd mistake in Indy Caitlin's home market following an event that was meant to unite the league. She attacked the one player who is actually providing the league with the means to make demands. Kelsey and others attempted to dismiss it as a joke, but Caitlin's supporters, again, the ones who are going to give the players far more money, did not see it that way. NBA champion and broadcaster Stacey King said exactly what needed to be said.
Quote, as you're fighting for better salaries, you're portraying a united front at your biggest event, you still find a way to throw shade at Caitlin Clark. Why? Stacey King posted. Quote, look at Sabrina's reaction to Plum's comment. It says a lot. Some of these girls are really petty, and someone needs to explain to them it's hurting their league, and it's sad to see. He's not wrong.
The WNBA players couldn't afford another setback after Kelsey's off-court remarks and the terrible on-court performance. The dagger would have been a 36% drop in ratings. The announcement of a historic event by ESPN was just what they needed. However, I'm only discussing the court of public opinion at the moment. The owners are able to look right through it. They would likely be the first to point out that it's actually worse behind closed doors if you dug a little more. It probably wouldn't have matched last year's $3.4 million if Caitlin had participated in the game rather than merely sitting on the sidelines. It would have easily defeated it. Take a peek at this season's numbers. The ratings soar when Caitlin performs. With viewership exceeding 2.7 million, 2.2 million, and 1.7 million, respectively, her games against the Sky, the Liberty, and the Sun have all been among the most watched WNBA broadcasts in decades. Therefore, we're not talking about 3.4 million viewers if Caitlin had dressed up for the All-Star game. This was not only a 36% decline, as we're likely talking about more than 4 million. The potential viewership was cut in half. But here's what's astounding about it all.
Even without Caitlin Clark, it was the second highest rated WNBA All-Star game ever, and that is a huge point of distinction. Two things are clear. If Caitlin Clark plays in the All-Star game, it will set records. But now, because of her popularity, even if she doesn't, it will break records and be the second highest ever. Only beaten by the time she played in it. And that matters.
Why not just mention the silent portion aloud instead of comparing it to 2023 to make it seem like some historic night? You just had the second most watched All-Star game ever thanks to the Caitlin Clark effect and all the new fans. She wasn't even having fun. Just acknowledge the Caitlin Clark effect is real. The league is expanding as a result. In the same sentence, welcome and express gratitude to your new followers. That's it. Fans only want to hear that. Nor this strange gaslighting, nor subtle jabs at Caitlin following the game that suggest she didn't initially agree with the statement, when she is absolutely the cornerstone of what you are fighting for. In actuality, the players will receive higher compensation. Without a doubt. Team values have doubled since Caitlin arrived, despite the league's annual losses. The owners have every incentive to make an investment. Neither they nor the players should desire a lockout.
Here's the reality, though.
If they simply accept the people who are enabling this progress, they may achieve much more. The more they oppose the Caitlin Clark effect, the more evident it is that it exists, and the longer Caitlin is the only player those people care about. Therefore, they should stop insulting the fans and claiming that Caitlin isn't the reason the numbers are moving. You are a GOAT, so leave a comment if you're still here. I appreciate you watching. I'll see you later.